All right, this is Goniometry Lecture 2. We are on page 14 and we will be covering page 14 and page 15 for Goniometry Lecture 2. Now, if you look at page 14, remember number 1, it says neutral position. The neutral position is the starting position for measuring joints, usually but not always corresponding to the anatomical position. So if we're making reference to the anatomical position, this is what is considered at. However, we'll look at some exceptions that's noted there on 14, and it says shoulder and hip rotation and forearm pronation and supination, meaning we need to take the body part out of the anatomical position for measurement. All right, so we've covered the shoulder and the hip rotation being out of the anatomical position. This is shoulder rotation internal and shoulder rotation external in the anatomical position. However, when we take it out of the anatomical position, we're measuring internal and external rotation, and then we're aligning the goniometer with that. If we're going to be measuring those motions, of course, we need to put the goniometer in a 90-degree angle, of course, reading the red scale if we have a red scale goniometer, or, of course, doing a subtraction or an addition with that goniometer number if that's the case. All right, let's look at number 2. Reads as 0. Now, the goniometer in many positions will read as 0. Both arms of the goniometer are together. All right, so both of the arms of the goniometer are together, and this would be started as the neutral position for some motions as listed here: shoulder flexion, shoulder extension, abduction, forearm pronation, and supination. So let's just show one example. If we're looking at shoulder flexion, this is considered shoulder flexion. This is shoulder flexion. With the goniometer in neutral for the closed position, this is the closed position for shoulder flexion. And if the patient just holds their arm in that position, then I will take the goniometer and move it from the closed position to that arm right there. All right, so again, this is an example of the goniometer starting in the closed position and then moving to wherever that body part moves. All right, that is number 2. All right, let's look at number 3. Reads as 180 degrees. That's also neutral. Now, it says both arms of the goniometer open into a straight line. Straight line. So the goniometer is open in a straight line. Elbow flexion and extension will be an example. Hip flexion and extension will be an example. Wrist flexion and extension will be an example. Radial and ulnar deviation will be an example. Knee flexion and extension will be an example. All right, so let's show one example. Let's look at wrist extension. Now let's do ulnar and radial deviation. We'll do that instead. All right, so here is the arm here, and I'm just putting it this high so that you can see. Again, the goniometer is on the body part this way, and it is starting in the open position. If the wrist moves this way, the goniometer will follow. If the wrist moves this way, the goniometer will follow. But again, in order for us to read correctly, the neutral position for this particular motion and the others that are listed there is with the goniometer in the 180-degree listing or position, and it will follow along with the body part. This will be the stationary arm, here will be the axis, here will be the movable arm. All right, that is number 3. Let's look at number 4. 90-degree angle represents neutral. Reads as 0. Red scale on some goniometers, not necessarily all goniometers. The movable arm alignment in relation to the stationary arm. The shoulder and hip internal rotation, external rotation, hip abduction, adduction, ankle dorsiflexion, and plantar flexion are the examples that are listed there. Now, so let's look at an example that we can use for the internal external rotation. So if we're working with, and if you can just slide over to your right a little bit for me. All right. If we're working with internal and external rotation of the shoulder, the arm is in this position here. And we'll just take this little pillow here just to be our example of a cushion underneath. I think this is a little bit too bulky, but you get the idea. So we're placing something underneath this distal end, not necessarily this high, and this is going to be the starting position. This is internal rotation, this is external rotation. All right, you get the idea. I'm gonna take this out, okay? All right, so again, this is internal rotation, and this is external rotation. Now, the subject will hold their arm there. The goniometer will start at a 90-degree angle. Stationary arm is aligned with the trunk or the thorax. The axis is aligned with the olecranon, and the movable arm is aligned with the lateral aspect of the ulna. So when we start for neutral, or the starting position, the goniometer will start at a 90-degree angle. This will be the starting position. And then we will read the goniometer. We will read the goniometer from the 0 point. Now, in this case, the 0 point is considered either the red 0 on the outside, if your goniometer has that, or it will be the 90-degree number that's here. If it went from the 90-degree number to the 80-degree number, then that person moved 10 degrees. All right, and then vice versa. If it went from the 90-degree number to the 100 degrees, again, the person moved 10 degrees. All right, this would be the neutral starting position, of course, for internal and external rotation of the shoulder. So again, some goniometer positions will start with the goniometer in the closed position, noting that this is the neutral position. There are times when the goniometer has to start in the open position, or the 180-degree position, and that will be considered neutral. And then there are times when the goniometer has to start in the 90-degree position, and this will be considered neutral. Now, let's move on to part B. It says, always read at eye level. Use a high-low table, sit on a rolling stool, kneel, get up on the bed, so that we can see the numbers head on. If for whatever reason you're standing and you're working with the patient like this here, then I'm not looking at the number head on, so I need to kneel down. If for whatever reason the body part is high, then I need to get on a stool so that I can see the number head on. All right, so stool or raise the bed, do whatever you need to do so that I can see it head on. All right, let's look at Roman numeral number 2, negative measurements. A measurement is recorded as negative if that motion ends, and it says here, cannot go any farther before it reaches the neutral or 0 starting position. Let's look at the elbow. This is 0 degrees of elbow extension. All right, and of course this is the full flexion for the elbow. If for whatever reason the bicep was tight, or for whatever reason the joint had some sort of filling within that joint capsule, and it didn't go down any further, then this person will be sitting in elbow flexion. If we're measuring elbow flexion, the starting position could not be 0, because we have not made it to that point because of, let's say, tightness or the bicep or something in that joint capsule. All right, so the starting position would be whatever this number would be here to that number. All right, so let's just see. We're going to say that the person can only extend their elbow to this point. All right, and we're just going to look at flexion first. We're talking about negative measurements, but let's talk about flexion first. And again, we want something under this distal elbow so that we can see. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and measure. And this, for her elbow extension. Matter of fact, let's bring your arm over here. Okay. Right there, good. And we're going to say that her elbow extension, or we'll say flexion first. Her elbow flexion starts at 40 degrees, all right, and it goes to 100, and let's see, looking at the lighting that's here. 70. Wow, she has a lot. A whole lot. Let's see. 100. Give me some time. I need some light this here. Okay. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 65 degrees. All right. Okay. So that is her elbow flexion. 165 degrees. So it goes from 40 degrees to 165 degrees. So the number would be written as 40 to 165 degrees. Active or passive, depending on how we ask them to do that or push for us. But 40 to 165 degrees. That will be the number for flexion. Now, if we're looking at the number for extension, if she was sitting at, and we'll say the 40 again, we'll put it right back at the 40. All right, so there's 20, 30, 40. So we'll say that this is where she is. All right. If she's sitting at 40 degrees, all right, and she cannot go any further, and we say, what is her extension? That is her extension. Then the number for extension would be written as negative 40 degrees elbow extension. Again, it will be written as negative 40 degrees elbow extension. When would it be a positive number? If this is negative 40, if I come here, I would assume that that is negative 30, negative 20, negative 10, 0, and if for whatever reason she was able to go beyond that, then it would be 0 to whatever number that is. So when a person is sitting in the opposite direction, this is considered a negative number if we're talking about the opposite direction. If I'm talking about flexion, it is, our example, 40 to 165. If we're talking about extension and she tries to extend her arm and it doesn't go anymore and I haven't made it to the neutral point yet, then she is in negative 40 degrees of elbow extension. An improvement would be if we put some heat, we do a massage, we do some stretching here at this bicep joint region, and an improvement would be if she went less into that extension, and let's say it's negative 35 or negative 30, that's an improvement. That means she got better. So we're looking for that number to become less, that negative number to become less. Negative 30, negative 25, until she gets to 0. All right, so she will always be considered a negative number for extension if she is sitting in flexion. All right. Now, let's look back at page 14. We're going to read letter B. Often occurs in joints with neutral extension or normal extension of 0 or small range of motion in one direction. Normal elbow flexion is 0 to 150 degrees. So, elbow flexion, 0 to 150 degrees. All right, so that's the normal elbow flexion. Extension is 0 or could be 0 to 10 degrees. So it could be straight or it could extend out a little bit more, but 0 is usually the norm. All right. Now, if you look at the example here, it says, looking at your picture, means that this elbow cannot straighten to 0 or cannot straighten to 0 or the neutral position. Now, max flexion for this example here on page 14 is 100 degrees. So there is 90, 95, 100. That's the maximum flexion that this person has. Max extension is 15 degrees of flexion, because it's still sitting in flexion, or if we're making the reference what the extension is, then it's negative 15 degrees extension. Or we can say, for this example on page 14, this person can go from 15 degrees to 100 degrees of elbow flexion, and they can extend the arm to negative 15 degrees of elbow extension. Okay? Now, look at the bottom there. It says actual elbow flexion, 15 to 100 degrees, as I just said, and extension would be negative 15 degrees.